This video is brought to you by me. If you like what you see, please consider subscribing and pledging your support on Patreon so I can afford to pay my bills and give my cat a break from powering my computer. So here's a fun question for you, dear viewer. What is it that makes someone gay? Is it the fact that they're attracted to people of the same sex? Or is it the fact that they recognize and incorporate that attraction into their identity? By that same token, what is it that makes someone straight, or bi, or pan, or cis, or trans, or... Well, I guess the real question is, what is it that makes someone what they are? And isn't it odd that we as people will look at someone and mentally assign that identity to them without actually being told of it? Today's trope is a bit of an odd one because not only is it something that nearly everyone has heard someone say at some point, but it's also something most people really wouldn't think of as a trope at all. In fact, the idea behind it has become so prevalent that even though the word itself has kind of fallen out of usage as slang terms naturally change, drop off, and are reintroduced to the language over time, I'd be surprised if I actually needed to explain what it is at all, though I still will for the sake of consistency. Gaydar is, simply put, the ability to determine a person's sexual orientation without being explicitly told. To be more specific, it's the ability to detect that a person is gay when they haven't actually come out to you. It's not uncommon for it to be treated as a specific form of intuition or wisdom, but the reality is that if it's not being supplemented by supernatural or sci-fi elements, then it largely comes down to observance of behavior and dependence on gay stereotypes, which is something I'll come back to in a bit. Gaydar is also a very rare kind of trope that exists in three distinct forms depending on how contained by the fourth wall it is. Or to put that in a less nerdy way, Gaydar is applied either by one character to another, the audience onto a specific character, or IRL between people. And as such, I kind of need to talk about all three, so I guess buckle in for a relatively short but comprehensive look at the concept of detecting the gays. We'll start with the first because it's the easiest to cover. Character to character is often used to humorous effect, whether it's being able to tell that someone is gay before they even know it themselves, such as in shows like Girls Like Magic, or it can be a literal gay detecting radar, such as the ones owned by Bender from Futurama, Dr. Insano from Spoonie's review of Beastmaster 2, or my personal favourite,
"Come on, little Gaydar, work your magic."
Or you can have a character who can just straight up tell the sexuality of someone at a glance, such as Ryo from the Yuri manga Strawberry Shake Sweet, who can also apparently tell when a lesbian has officially come to terms with her sexuality, which I gotta say, is some next level hilarious bullshit that I'm totally here for. Obviously the latter two options rely on rule of funny rather than truth in television, and I honestly kind of prefer them because they're more fun and realism can't suck it. But you're more likely to find that it comes from stereotypes or an above average eye for detail, which actually doesn't preclude it from being comedic. I mean, Legally Blonde has that scene where Enrique being gay serves as the key break in the case, and it's entirely predicated on some of the biggest gay stereotypes of the time.
Don't stomp your little last season Prada shoes at me, honey.
Wait, back up. How do you know that he's gay?
Gay men know designers. Straight men don't.
You know what? He did leave a share tape in the pool house one time.
And then the musical extended this to an entire song that's basically just the entire cast trying to ascertain the accuracy of their collective gaydar, which, stereotyping aside, is honestly really fucking funny. I wonder how actual Europeans generally feel about that song. And of course, the trope isn't just for comedic purposes, it can be used for drama or the occasional really tender moment. My favourite example of the latter is from the book Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, which, spoiler warning, involves the dad of one of the boys sitting him down and pointing out that he's obviously in love with his friend. It's a really good book, you should give it a read sometime. It's also worth noting that while it's called gaydar, the concept as a whole doesn't just apply to gay characters and is sometimes used to detect whether a character is trans. My favourite example of this is from the visual novel Whodunit, where Emma claims to have a theydar and that she can tell when someone is actually non-binary, and I like this because it threw me the fuck off and made me laugh when I read it. So yeah, gaydar can have multiple applications depending on what you're looking for. Lastly for this section, it would be remiss of me not to mention that depending on the execution, gaydar has some overlap with the hoye, closet key, and trans audience interpretation tropes. The first two already being covered in my other videos, and the last being the topic of a future one, so you can watch those and look forward to that if you so wish. Moving on to gaydar as applied by the audience, we can actually talk about the two audience applications together because there's an astonishing level of overlap between how people interpret what's gay or not in fiction and non-fictional entities. As I said earlier, in reality, gaydar is largely just the observance of behavior and a reliance on stereotyping, and this stems from a couple things. The first is that human brains are designed to recognize patterns and draw connections between things, which is where a lot of the stereotypes actually come from. People notice that, say, a large number of gay men are into musical theatre, assume that being into musical theatre is just a gay thing, and then people spread the concept around until the idea that being into musical theatre at all is a sign of being gay, and that becomes a stereotype. And of course, some stereotypes are intentionally set into motion by malicious entities, but that's a topic for a different day. The point is that stereotypes are an assumption that an individual truth is a group truth, and so that becomes the lens through which people examine each other. I think it's likely that a lot of people have an anecdote involving something like this. Mine actually comes from when I was 6 and my grandma called up my mom to tell her in a hushed tone, "I just thought you should know, Wrighton's favourite colour is pink." My mom basically said, "Yeah, so?" And my grandma repeated, "I just thought you should know," before hanging up. It's worth noting, by the way, that pink has never been my favourite colour. I like it, and I told her as much because my cousins didn't want a pink thing and I didn't care what the colour was. But my favourite colour is and always has been teal. But that didn't matter because my grandma saw that her mask-presenting grandchild liked pink and thought it meant I was gay. Which is really fucking dumb if you stop to think about it for even a moment. I mean, I am gay, but liking pink has nothing to do with it. It's because I really like men. Also, she wasn't homophobic and was actually greatly supportive of me when I came out. She just had old-fashioned ideas of masculinity. And obviously this sort of thing is a problem, not just because it can lead to making false assumptions about people, but because people who are aware of stereotypes will often restrict themselves to avoid being perceived as something they're not. And it leads to people living worse lives out of fear of that. If you want a deeper dive into how harmful this is, check out my video on Toxic Masculinity because I really don't want to go into the whole thing twice. You'll find the link in its natural habitat. So what about the observational skills I mentioned? Well, this is where we get into the discussion on human behaviour, because outside of reliance on stereotypes, there's also just a lot you can learn about a person by paying attention to their body language and habits. And I'm not referring to when one guy compliments another and people automatically assume that means he's gay. That's just more stereotypes and heteronormative bullshit. I'm referring to things like how open someone's stance is when approached by a member of the same sex, where their eyes land, how the pitch of their voice changes, or if their pupils are dilated. There are dozens of small signs that can demonstrate arousal and attraction that people tend to not be aware they're exhibiting, that the observant can pick up on if they know what to look for. And that's before considering intentionally coded signs. Yeah, that's another part of it. Historically, members of the LGBT community have used codes to communicate their status in times when being out in the open was an active danger to the self. And so being in the know and communicating that way was essentially a means of engaging in a silent, if limited, conversation. Less gaydar and more gay Morse code, except with hankies and carabiners instead of dots and dashes. Gorse mode. Morse code? Nah, those don't work. Of course, none of this is perfect. Sadly, we live in reality, so we don't have access to perfect gaydar, and while this is going to be hard to hear, gaydar is kind of just extremely fallible, both when applied to fiction and real life, because we tend to get caught up in aesthetics and our own wishful thinking. Yeah, this is where hard truth time rears its ugly head. People of all kinds tend to get so caught up in the superficial aesthetics of gayness that they kind of just decide someone is gay based off the shallowest read possible, usually in regards to nothing but appearances. But aside from homophobic dipshits who are constantly chomping at the bit to have something to throw tantrum about, queer people are just as likely to have the same shallow reads because we just really want to see more of us in the world, be that fiction or IRL. It's a form of confirmation bias you might call please be gaydar, where because you really want someone, real or fictional, to be gay or trans or whatever letter of the alphabet mafia that they're most looking for, they filter details through that desire and come out with a heavily skewed read. And to be clear, if you've done this, this is not a moral failing on your part. I've absolutely done it myself, both unintentionally or on purpose. Because it can be very fun to just decide, hey, this character's gay because I said so. Though admittedly, that latter part is not actually gaydar. It's more like a highly unserious, focused rainbow laser of death of the author. But when you're not actively making shit up for fun, it's important to remember that just because something is applicable, that doesn't mean it's correct. And while execution is always more important than intent, you do have to give that execution an honest reading. And there's often a huge gulf between what we want to be true and what's actually true. I think queer people fall into this trap so often because being us can be a very scary and lonely experience, especially with the way the world is now. It can be comforting to read our favourite characters as being more like us so we feel less alone in our struggle, and that goes doubly true for real life, where we are very much the minority in a world that can often feel like it's just not built with us in mind. But we still have to remember to check our own biases and not rely on assumptions and wishful thinking. So to summarise, I'm not really sure. This one was kind of hard to properly unpack for obvious reasons. I guess just remember that people are infinitely more complex than what you see on the surface, and that's often true of well-written characters too. And also remember that a difference in cultural norms can mean that what one group will read as a definite sign of queerness can often just be a completely unremarkable occurrence in another culture. And for the writers watching this, remember that there's no real need to make your fictional Gaydar play nice with reality if it doesn't fit the tone of your story. Just do what you think is best and have fun with it. Also, try not to hold it against people if they read your character as queer when that wasn't your intention at all. Some of them are homophobic fucking morons who could use a good punch in the throat, but a lot of us are just hopeful and really just looking for more comfort. Also, if you're someone who was told that your queer reading was wrong by the author, don't be a dick about it. Okay, love you, thanks for watching, bye!